Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. Hope your week's going great so far. So far, so good for me this week. And I do appreciate you being with me so very, very much. Okay, want to dig right back into it. So what I've been doing with you for the last 2 days is to show that the coming of the Son of Man. Now, I haven't mentioned the coming of the Son of Man all that much on Monday and Tuesday, but I want to bring you back to the idea that Matthew chapter 24, verse 30, is talking about the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven. That's Daniel chapter 7, 13 and 14. Well, as I've demonstrated to you for the last 2 mornings, that coming of the Lord, that coming of the Son of Man in Matthew chapter 24, verse 30, it would also be the fulfillment of Zechariah chapter 12, 10, and Zechariah 13, and as we shall see here momentarily, Zechariah chapter 14. Well, Zechariah 12 through 14 was a prediction of the AD 70 judgment of the Lord, judgment coming of the Lord, in AD 70. So if the coming of the Son of Man of Matthew 24:30 is Daniel chapter 12, and if it's also Zechariah 12 to 14, then that means that the coming of the Son of Man of Daniel chapter 7, 13 and 14, was a judgment coming. It was not the ascension of Acts chapter 1. You follow that? Just go back and listen to that real close, okay? It's powerful stuff. Okay, I have demonstrated for you how Zechariah chapter 12 and verse 10 predicted the time in which they would look upon him whom they had pierced. They will look upon me whom they have pierced. And that time of looking upon the one whom had been pierced would be a time of mourning throughout the entire land of Israel, not just Jerusalem, the entire land. But it's the same time period as when a fountain for sin and for cleansing in Israel and for Israel in the house of David would be opened. But again, that would be the time in which they would wound the one in the house of his friends. That's the betrayal of Jesus. And it would be the time in which 2/3 of the people in the land, once again, not just the city, this time of mourning, ladies and gentlemen, is, quote, land-wide. That it was not the crucifixion. Okay? So, Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10, is the time of mourning at the coming of the Lord, the one whom they had pierced. That's how John applies it in Revelation chapter 1, verse 7. Behold, he comes with the clouds. Every eye shall see him, even those who pierced him. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that even those who pierced him is what they call exegetical, which is defining what it means by every eye shall see him. Even those who pierced him. And once again, that's a direct echo citation of Zechariah chapter 12, which, as we have already seen, is predicting nothing but the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. And let's drive this home even more. And by the way, don't forget my December 21, 2021, U.S. orders only, and January 2022, very special discount offer on the entire list of the products that we offer on my website, DonKPreston.com and BibleProphecy.com. On all orders over $25 or more, you get a 15% discount plus free shipping. Now, that means you can order my book, Who is This Babylon? Why am I identifying this? Because in this book, I have an in-depth discussion of Zechariah 12, 13, and 14, and how John in Revelation is depicting the fulfillment of Zechariah. You know, one very, very highly respected commentator, Philip Carrington by name, who I cite in the book, said that no other chapters in all of the Old Testament had more influence on John in the closing chapters of Revelation than Zechariah 12 to 14. It's powerful stuff. Okay? So, as I mentioned to you yesterday, I want to drive home the fact, okay, Zechariah chapter 12 to 14 is Revelation. Revelation chapter 1 is admitted by most commentators to be Matthew 25, 14 and following. They agree that it's Acts chapter 1. But guess what? As I noted at the close of yesterday, Matthew chapter 24, verse 30, also quotes Zechariah. Remember that John is applying Zechariah to AD 70. Matthew chapter 24, 30 not only quotes from Zechariah, but it quotes from Daniel chapter 7, 13 and 14. Now, in Matthew 24, 30, Jesus is talking about his coming in judgment of Jerusalem in AD 70. Most amillennialists, most postmillennialists admit and agree to that. Okay? So Matthew chapter 24, 30, Jesus is quoting, citing, echoing Daniel 7, 13 and 14. But he's applying it to his judgment coming of Jerusalem. That means that Daniel chapter 7 and the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven was not talking about the ascension of Acts chapter 1, as is normally applied. Okay, got to hurry here. Notice, and by the way, I have a whole series of articles on my website, donkpreston.com. Just go there, and in the search bar, just do a search for the eschatology or the influence of Zechariah on New Testament eschatology. I have a lot of articles on there to go into greater detail of what I'm sharing with you here. Okay? Notice that we have these constant references to in that day. Now, it begins in Zechariah chapter 8, showing us this entire panoramic view of the first century events, the last days events, consummating in the day of the Lord. Okay? Behold, what? Behold what? At the time of the judgment on the land of Zechariah 13, 6 and following, 7 and following, when 2/3 of the people would perish out of the land, and a remnant would be saved, behold, the day of the Lord is coming, your spoil will be divided in your midst, for I will gather all nations to battle against Jerusalem. The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, the women ravished, half of the city shall go into captivity. But the remnant, who is that remnant? Oh, it's the 1/3 that came out of the destruction of chapter 13. What do we have here, ladies and gentlemen? Well, you may find this difficult to believe. I hope you find it impossible to believe. Some amillennialists, to escape the force of Zechariah 14, they say that Zechariah 14:1 and following is descriptive of the entirety of the Christian age and the attacks and the persecution and the martyrdom of the church during the entirety of the Christian age. Seriously? Bill Lockwood, in a debate with Holger Neubauer in Michigan a couple of years ago, made that very argument. And Holger Neubauer did a fantastic job of pointing out, well, are you telling us that this language, the city shall be taken? Well, wait a minute. The New Jerusalem shall never be taken by its enemies. Number 2, the houses rifled, desolated, the women ravished. Are you telling us that's a description of the persecution of the church throughout the Christian age? And unbelievably, Bill Lockwood got up and said, yes, that's what it's describing, the entirety of the Christian age. Ladies and gentlemen, the women ravished is kind of nice language for saying the women will be raped. We're supposed to believe this is a description of the fate of the church throughout the entirety of the Christian age? You know, this is one of those argumentum ad desperatum things that should be just summarily dismissed because it is ridiculous. Argumentum ad absurdum. Now, this is very clearly talking about a time of judgment on Jerusalem. And here's what you need to know. Historically, commentator after commentator after commentator says it's AD 70. That's not an unknown. It's not an unpopular. It's not even a minority view. It is widely recognized. It's what Eusebius said, for whatever weight you want to put on Eusebius. And we can name other commentators, many, many commentators, who understand Zechariah 14 is talking about AD 70. In the churches of Christ in which I was raised, I don't know that it would be safe to say it's the dominant view, but it is a very, very popular view. So here we have a destruction of Jerusalem. At the time when 2/3 of the people of the land would perish, the time of the opening of the fountain, the time when they would look upon him whom they had pierced, and all the land would mourn. And he continues. Verse 4, in that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. The Mount of Olives shall be split in two. There's a division. A division in the land, a division in the people of God. And I've got to hurry here. Verse 5. Then you shall flee through my mountain valley, for the mountain valley shall reach Azal. Yes, you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Well, wait a minute. Jesus told the apostles, remember, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, then let those who are in Judea flee. You reckon that has anything to do with this fleeing at the time, the generation of the destruction and judgment of Jerusalem? We continue. Thus what? At the time of flight from the purge and destruction of Jerusalem that is coming, thus the Lord my God will come, and all the saints with you. Notice the use of these pronouns again. Zechariah has a way of using these pronouns that just kind of reaches up and slaps us across the face. And it shall come to pass in that day there shall be no light. The lights will diminish. It shall be one day which is known to the Lord. Wait a minute. Jesus, in predicting the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, said, but of that day and hour knows no man. Ladies and gentlemen, he's echoing directly Zechariah chapter 14. Zechariah 14 is not talking about an end of time. And Jesus in Matthew chapter 24, verse 36, is directly echoing Zechariah chapter 14. Therefore, Jesus is not talking about an end of time. Now, look, I could go on and on. Believe you me, I could go on and on in Zechariah 14. But here's the point. Pardon me. The point is that the return of the absent master of Matthew chapter 25, 14 and following is Revelation chapter 1. That's the majority view, okay? Now, if you don't take that view, you've got other issues to deal with. If you believe that Revelation chapter 1 and verse 7 is AD 70, then likewise you must take Matthew 24 and verse 30 as AD 70. But then you've got to answer the question, where's the delineation? Where's the delineation between Matthew 24:30, Revelation 1:7, and this supposed different coming of the Lord of Matthew 25:14? And where's the difference between Revelation chapter 1 verse 7 and Acts chapter 1? You see, ladies and gentlemen, the distinctions and the divisions, the dichotomizations that have been created in order to sustain a futurist view of eschatology are simply untenable. They're not textual, they are not contextual, they are based upon an a priori view of the nature of the coming of the Lord. Zechariah is very, very clear about the time, the context, and the framework of the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven. It was not the ascension. It is not an end of time coming. It was in AD 70. Well, with that, we're going to move on to another element of Matthew 24, 29 and following, as I demonstrate that the constituent elements of Matthew chapter 24, 29 to following are the ground and the basis and the template for other New Testament passages that people try to apply to the end of the world. In other words, you can go down Matthew chapter 24, 29 and following, list its constituent elements. You can go, for instance, to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, list the constituent elements, and they are exactly and precisely the same. Thus, if you agree that the coming of the Son of Man of Matthew chapter 24, verse 30, was AD 70, then the coming of the Son of Man in 1 Thessalonians 4 was in AD 70. I'll see you on the flip side.